What was Gideon's complaint about God when the angel of the Lord appeared to him? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Judges on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Judges 6 verses 11 to 18, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Judges 6 verse 11, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Judges chapter 6, beginning at verse 11. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree which was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." Gideon said to him, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles, which our fathers told us about, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites." Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" So he said to him, "O my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." And the Lord said to him, "Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat the Midianites as one man." Then he said to him, "If now I have found favor in your sight, then show me a sign that it is you who talk with me. Do not depart from here, I pray, until I come to you and bring out my offering and set it before you." And he said, "I will wait until you come back." In our last lesson, we discussed how the time period of Gideon must have overlapped with the time period of Deborah. We looked at how the time of rest from oppression after Gideon, 40 years, was the same amount of rest from oppression after Deborah. This alone doesn't prove anything, but when we take a look at the transition in this book from Deborah to Gideon, we note that there is a difference. For it does not say that after Deborah, when Israel went off into sin, like it did with earlier judges. In fact, Deborah is not even mentioned at all in relation to Gideon's judgeship, which would make sense if Deborah and Gideon were contemporary with each other. We also looked at the state of male leadership in Israel being very similar in the days of Deborah and the days of Gideon, something that today's reading highlights specifically. We looked at how the text doesn't say that the Midianites ruled over Israel, simply that for 7 years the Midianites came up against Israel and destroyed their crops. This would make sense, since Jabin and Sisera of the Canaanites were ruling over northern Israel during the time of Deborah, and so if Gideon and Deborah were contemporary, we shouldn't see Midianite rule. And then finally we looked at the condition of Israel during this oppression, which is that they were so fearful. They often hid in caves, something that is eerily similar to what is described in the Song of Deborah. Thus, I believe it is safe to conclude that Gideon and Deborah largely overlap, placing the Midianite oppression in the final 7 years of the Canaanite oppression, meaning that our story begins in chapter 6 in about 1191 BC. Now you might ask, why would God use two judges at the same time? Because one dealt with the Canaanite oppression and one dealt with the Midianite oppression. Both of these peoples had large armies that would come from different directions, so it makes absolute sense that two judges would be used. We see this in other places in Scripture where Ezekiel and Daniel, both in captivity, were contemporary with each other, as were the prophets Haggai and Zechariah after the captivity. At numerous times, God has two spokespeople, each serving different purposes, as Gideon and Deborah do here. Now coming back to chapter 6, Israel cried out for the Lord for deliverance from the Midianites, but God didn't immediately send them Gideon. He first sent them a prophet who explained the reason for their oppression, which was that they had gone after other gods. It is only in verse 11 that Gideon is recruited. In verse 11, we again find the angel of the Lord doing something. From the context here, we can again conclude that God is the one actually being talked about, with God taking on the form that Gideon could see. What the angel of the Lord did was sit under the terebinth tree, which was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite. If you recall, Abiezer was a son of Manasseh, and so What we find out is that Gideon, who was the son of Joash, was of the tribe of Manasseh that lived west of the Jordan. Now what was Gideon doing when the angel of the Lord appeared to him? He was threshing out wheat in the winepress in order to hide that wheat from the Midianites. Normally, wheat would be threshed out on a threshing floor, a large flat surface that was high enough to catch a breeze. And of course, this large flat surface allowed animals to be used to do some of the work. But if Gideon threshed out his wheat there, he could be seen, and his wheat would be destroyed by the Midianites. Instead, he decided to thresh out the wheat in a winepress. A winepress was generally cut into bedrock and was not constructed to catch any sort of breeze. It was much too small to be used with animals, meaning that Gideon would have to do all his threshing by hand. So it's no wonder why, when the Lord appeared to Gideon and said that the Lord was with him as a mighty man of valor, that Gideon might be skeptical. For after all, look at all the hard work he was having to do because of the threat of the Midianites. Gideon asked, where are all the miracles which the fathers in Israel had said the Lord had done when he brought Israel up out of Egypt? And why had the Lord allowed the Midianites to come and oppress them? Of course, we know why that was. But for Gideon, in that moment, it was hard for him to comprehend that through all this, that the Lord could be with him. The Lord responded that Gideon was to use his might, and he would deliver Israel from the hand of the Midianites, for the Lord had sent him for this purpose. Now Gideon's response to God is similar to Moses' response to God in Exodus 3 verse 11, when God told Moses that he would deliver Israel from Egyptian oppression. Who am I that I can save Israel? After all, in the clan of Manasseh, Gideon was from the weakest household, and from his father's house, Gideon was the least, meaning he was likely the youngest. To this, the Lord responded that he would be with Gideon, and Gideon would defeat the Midianites as one man, meaning with one blow. But even this assurance wasn't enough for Gideon. He wanted a sign. This was the state of male leadership at this time in Israel. Barak needed Deborah to go with him into battle in order to have assurance that the Lord would bring them victory over the Canaanites. And here is Gideon, speaking to the Lord himself, getting assurance from the Lord himself, who cannot lie. And that wasn't enough for Gideon. The sign that Gideon asked for was that the Lord remain until Gideon came back with his offering to the Lord and set it before him. The Lord agreed to do this. God met Gideon where Gideon was. God could have chided Gideon as he chided Moses, but he didn't. He suffered Gideon here and waited for Gideon's return. We'll continue with this, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Judges chapter 6, verses 19 to 27, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.